Hey everyone, this is Ken Rakowski, and this is Metal Connect, where we meet one of the speakers from Saturday and we dive into what they're doing. This is an open dialogue. This is a place where you could ask questions and really dig deep, and where these speakers could help you out in your personal and your professional business. This is an open forum. Dive in, ask questions, and let's get into it. Howard Lim is joining us. Howard and I met, I don't know what, maybe 15 years ago? And Howard is a branding expert. He's worked with some of the top brands on the planet. And on today's Metal Connect, it's all about understanding what it takes to make sure your brand is fortified and your brand is understood by the other side. As Howard brought up the other day, your brand is really what they think it is. So understanding what they think you are and living in that is pretty important. Howard, take us for a journey.
Okay, I will. Let's see here. I'm going to share my screen.
Well, let me give you access to that. You can now share your screen. Go for it.
Okay, fabulous. Let's see here.
Howard, do me a favor real quick. Tell people a little more about you so they understand your background.
Yeah, actually, I'm going to go a little bit through my background that leads into, you could say, a new standard in branding. So I'll go through that. And by the way, you're right, Ken, this is for your group for you to record, but not for other people to record and reproduce, because it's a big, obviously my intellectual property.
Got it.
Okay. All right. Well, let's begin. So, why I'm here is to deliver world-class applicable content so you can think about your own business and brand. And then what is the opportunity of rebranding in this crisis? And then looking at your business as far as a deeper purpose and more wealth, okay? So that's what I want to share and create for us here. So I love this quote by Einstein to start off with: imagination is more important than knowledge. And so when I look at this quote, it's more important to creatively think than do what other people have done in the past, and why I'll lead up to that. So a little bit about my background. 33 years ago, I started my company and I was known as a disruptive solution provider. And what that means is that I was able with my team to help lead the digital revolution and actually have impact in different industries. So for example, when Steve Jobs came back, we're part of the team of the relaunch of the G3. For Disney, Vice President came to us and said, we want to launch the Broadway show Lion King. So we helped position them to launch Lion King, which I think has produced $6.4 billion now. We helped reposition City of Santa Monica, Third Street Promenade. We actually brought out DVDs to the market space for the rental movie space for Philips and for MGM, and the list goes on. So this just gives you a little bit about why I'm here, and talk about too what it really takes to be a disruptor and what that means exactly as well. So long story short, we produce billions of dollars for our clients in revenues, value, and equity. And then I had a revelation about 20 years ago. And the revelation was this: is like, why are 95% of companies failing or becoming stagnant in the first 2 to 10 years? So I made a commitment to design a model, it took me 10 years, to invert this into successful companies. And that's really our purpose here at How Creative, okay? So what we do is we look at positioning, and then we look at identity, and we look at marketing. Now here's the first thing, is that a lot of companies, they have an idea, they work with their business model, they get a general idea who their target market is, and they go right into the marketplace, but they forget the biggest part of the equation, which is how is their identity going to be received. So I'm going to spend quite a bit of time on this middle section, is the identity, okay? So as I was saying on Saturday, a brand is not a logo, the product or service. It's not even your business. It's what other people are saying about you. It's not what you're saying. And then I always say, how big of a billboard are you actually creating in the heart and the mind of the consumer for them to remember that you're the only choice for them, okay? So my quote is this: the expectation, it's the expectation matched to the experience. So there's an expectation that you're signaling out there through your website, through your sales, through trade events, everything to communicate who you are is setting up an expectation. The big question to ask, are you creating an experience to match that expectation? Okay. So as I showed you and Ken on Saturday, like if you had a chance to win $1 million, would you drive a brand new tractor or a brand new Ferrari? Well, of course, people would choose a Ferrari. Most people haven't driven either of these vehicles, especially the 2020 models, but you already have an expectation, okay? It'd be a huge disappointment if the Ferrari was slower than the tractor, okay? That would not be a healthy thing or a good thing, okay? So here's a big thing. When I start building and helping to position Fortune 500 companies to get bigger and deeper market share around the globe, this is what I really realize is that the business doesn't run the company, the brand experience does. Really important to get. The business doesn't run the company, the brand experience does. And I'm going to dive more into what truly is a brand and how do you create it. So there's only two ways to create a brand, branding from the hip or branding by design. Here's the problem. Most people are trying to brand themselves, or they're hiring the wrong people that say they do branding, or they're hiring people that are not branders, like graphic designers, advertising. Are they all necessary? Absolutely. But again, branding is looking at all the parts to make the whole. So let's just say that you're on a 5-yard line and you get to 30-yard line and you realize that the name of the company is too limited, okay? Like, let's say Domino's Pizza. And you realize that the business model was more than just making pizza. That's the reason why they had to reposition themselves at just saying Domino's, right? Who's in a big trouble right now? 20th Century Fox, because we're in the 21st century. So a lot of times, just even the name is inappropriate or incorrect, okay? So you get down, let's say the 30-yard line, you hit the 15-yard line, and you're going back and forth oscillating, but you're never ever getting to the actual end zone, okay? And that becomes a misfortune because of waste, it becomes a waste of time and capital. Here's the other big issue, and there's 3 types of branding people, just so you're clear. They're the strategists, the ones that implement building that identity, and there's those who manage the brand. The other big problem is that when it comes to your service providers, let's say you have, your social media people doing a part, let's say you're doing TV advertisement, let's say you're doing website, you're creating an app, but everyone's working in their own silo and no one's working together as a team, and they're turning to you, but you don't have the experience to be able to be the orchestrator, to be able to run the orchestra, okay? So this becomes very expensive for companies as well. And what I call that is a silo effect, okay? Where this leads up to, which is the misfortunate part, is you end up with a fragmented identity. So let's say that this is your core, this is what your marketing people are working on, this is what your website people are working on, your social media. Nothing matches to how you want to be represented because you haven't yourself determined how you want to be represented, okay? Well, why is this a problem? Because there's a poor reception. So on a scale of 10 being best, a lot of times companies, unfortunately, are only perceived as a 2 or 3 or 4 at the very best. The other problem is that you can't grow. Okay, you keep firing, rehiring, advertising people, graphic design people who are saying they're doing branding, is because you haven't set up again the core to be matched of how you want to be represented through what I call aspiration engagement points. Every opportunity for a bystander to be a buyer, okay? And the third major problem, it's a race to the bottom because now you have to compete on pricing, not on the value of your product, service, or information, or a combination, okay? So the difference between how you present yourself and how your position is where the money is, okay? So like I mentioned before, this is what we came up and we created, was how do we get it where you're positioned properly? Okay, the first thing when I talk about position, and I'm gonna dive in deeper to show you some case studies, What is it that's truly differentiating you? That was an assignment I gave on Saturday. What do you feel is truly differentiating you that actually adds value to the consumer? That actually adds value to the consumer. That's an actual benefit to the consumer, okay? Another way of looking at it too is in a space of differentiation, how do you want to be seen differently than your competition? Now, here's the important thing to get. Back in the 70s, there was fewer products. Look at all the automobile choices you have, and there's still new automakers that are coming out. Look at all the soft drinks. Look at all the power drinks that are out. Everything is super crowded right now. And the only way that you truly can differentiate is if you disrupt and you actually shift the way people think about your product versus everyone else. And again, I'll give a demonstration around that because right now it's a little bit abstract, but I'll show you a case study, okay? The second component to this is once you figure out your core positioning, what's going to differentiate you, what's going to actually make you money in a multitude of different ways, and how are you going to position in the mind of the consumer. There's 3 points: your business model, your brand, how it differentiates. Third component, how are you to occupy the space in the mind of the consumer? There's only so much data someone can hold in their mind. What's even better than the mind? Reaching their heart, and they have this, you hit them so emotionally strong, they go, I need it, and I believe in their values, okay? The second component to this, again, is the identity, that everything is telling the same story. Your social media, your marketing, your advertising, your website, everything's telling the same story is what is making you unique, okay, from everybody else. I should mention too, another key component to this, and this for you to review, is what is your promise? Okay, here's a case study that I didn't do, but I know of. When it came to the car rental space, Hertz was number 1 in the car rental space. Avis knew that when they merged to the marketplace, that Hertz was number 1. What were they going to do differentiate themselves from Hertz? And it became better customer service. Their tagline is "We try harder." That is their brand promise. Your brand promise whittles down to literally something you could say in 7 words or less. That's how powerful it should be. It's the substance of really how you're positioning yourself truly to cut through the clutter, and the noise of messaging, that yours is so clear that a 3-year-old could get it, that they could get it like that, okay? That's how clear it needs to be. And it needs to be in a way that it's in layman's term. Don't get tricky. It has to be in layman's term, okay? The other component to this, as far as a core position, by the way, it has to be authentic to you. Has to be authentic to you. So again, as I demonstrated this on Saturday, the reason why these two are extremely important is that it has the opportunity to influencing the mind and heart of the consumer, okay? Here's the deal, you guys. You can influence the consumer, but you're never going to be able to change their mind because they own your perception. That's where their expectation needs to match with the experience of your product, service, or information, okay? So in this case, you're now revealed, and you have the opportunity to reflect your best foot forward and make much greater opportunities, okay? Now, we have a COVID-19. We're in the middle of a crisis. Businesses cannot do the same as they have been doing, especially restaurants. Look at gyms. Look at how much shift is happening right now, okay? You need to be thinking about whether you're B2B or B2C or B2G, meaning government. You have to look at things differently now because we're creating a new standard of how people are going to interact with your brand doing this because of this COVID-19. Look, we can't do it in person. We have to use Zoom, right? So I say you can't compete in today's economy with a brand from yesterday. You have to be forward thinking in a way that you want to attract your consumers, okay? So here's a big critical part to branding that's usually missed out. And this is what I learned by representing in positioning the big giant companies. It's how you accelerate your brand equity. What is brand equity? It's assets that are linked to the identity to create value to both the company and the consumer through your products or service, okay? So let me just illustrate this with one of the biggest brands in the world, of course, Coca-Cola. So if it wasn't for Coca-Cola, for the color red, if it wasn't for its secret ingredient as you're leaving as a trade secret, if it wasn't for all the advertising focused around open happiness, that is their brand promise, by the way. If it wasn't for the color red that they dominate in the color space, they own that. That's why Pepsi is blue, okay? If it wasn't for all these attributes and assets, tangible and intangible, they would be worth $60 billion. But because of the tangibility of the equity and the emotion that's tied in, it's worth $120 billion. That is the idea behind building a brand and a differentiation between graphic design. Graphic design, you're kind of like putting out a fire saying, oh, I need to get this website, I need to get this logo done. Branding is about building assets that build the equity of the company over time. This is really, you got to get this because this is really critical because it's more long-term thinking with strategy to build up the business value, okay? Really critical. So these aren't harsh decisions that are made. They're very calculated decisions from the name to the color red. Here's the cool thing too. Every intellectual property you could own that actually differentiates you adds value. Barbie pink for Mattel, they own that pink. They create a Pantone color, and if any toy tried to copy that, you better believe they'd be sued in a heartbeat. Okay, if I'm trying to emulate a Coca-Cola shape of the bottle, forget it. You're gonna get a bunch of attorneys on your butt. Reason why is because this is what produces future earnings. This is what makes the stock market move, is because they got that mind share and that heart share. So let's just say, just to suppose you're in a different country, okay? And let's say that we're all Americans here. And let's just say that you're in Egypt and you're looking for a cold drink and there's always foreign drinks, and then you see the shape of Coca-Cola. What has built-in trust for you as the consumer? Coca-Cola. So you see how this is all working? It's really creating where you have instant recall. The consumer has instant recall, what that brand stands for, how it differentiates itself, and why is it important to me, okay? Okay, so it's really looking at all the parts that make up the whole. Now, here's the thing. I said the logo is not the brand. It's about 5% of branding, okay? But the name and the mark, if it's done right, I call it a mark, is the most valuable asset you could own, if it's done right. Otherwise, it's a liability. Meaning that this becomes the entry point way to the mind of the consumer when they see Nike, and if Nike done a good job marketing and advertising, people should know they're about the apparel industry, they're about quality, they're about innovation. It's really the face of the company, of the brand, of the company. You see that? Is it the totality of the brand? In a sense, it is, but it's not the only thing to build that identity. That's where people get confused as well. They think, oh, the logo is the brand. No, that's not true. It's all the components that are creating that meaning. So now if you see the Nike swoosh, it has meaning. If it wasn't for all the branding and building that awareness in the mind of the consumer, the Nike swoosh would be meaningless, therefore not worth much.
It seems like that Nike swoosh, its brand and its brand identity is generational also. So someone like my age, our age, sees it different than somebody that is a millennial.
Exactly, and that's when they would get smart and reposition on a new generation of buyers, okay?
Right.
And that's where Coca-Cola, where I see Kentucky Fried Chicken, where they got the younger guy, he's more comical versus when back in the 70s.
Yeah, but Howard, I think Kentucky Fried Chicken going to KFC was a whole brand migrating to a healthier brand concept.
Exactly.
And if you travel outside the United States, KFC is monstrous in size compared to here in the United States. People
Exactly.
dress up to go to KFC in Indonesia. They dress up. So it's a different mindset. So
Yep.
what the brand looks like here and there, and that's kind of fascinating to where how does a Nike transform itself because it's one company that feels differently towards different consumers.
Well, you're exactly right. So what happens is that with Nike and big global brands, they really understand the culture and the psychographics of where their brand is now located in a geographic location. And so it's really using that in a sense of saying, hey, we're going to build our brand awareness in this way because of that culture. They
So,
really need to understand that culture.
and Michael's saying something, where the younger generation has no clue who the founders were or their names. It doesn't really matter. Like Blake Mikowski is the founder of Tom's Shoes, and Tom's doesn't even mean Tom's, it's tomorrow's shoes. So it's not really about the founders anymore and their story. It's about the brand and what it represents to them moving forward.
Exactly. Only a couple of times it's synonymous, like Steve Jobs and Apple.
Yeah.
But you know what? It's very dangerous too if the brand is recognized as an individual because it has a difficult time to live on when that person passes away. Like, well, quite honestly, like Tony Robbins, right?
Tony
Tony
Robbins, or
Robbins,
even Papa John's Pizza, because of his political position or something like that, it's very dangerous then.
it's very dangerous. It's very dangerous. You have to, you really, yeah, exactly. I always say when I work with clients building their brand and I get what's called the brand personality, I always remind them at the very beginning and several times during this process, it's not about you, it's the entity that we're building. What kind of relationship do we want to build with its customers?
Yeah.
Okay. So it's very different. It's like having a corporation, it's a different entity.
But I think you're right. Tony Robbins is a great example. Something happens to Tony, what's it take with that brand direction? Valid point.
Yeah, exactly. So it becomes very dangerous. So now I'm going to move into an evidence case study where I'm going to pull things apart. Okay. And by all means, anybody join in. Okay. So just to show you, even during this time, there's opportunities because this company here came to us in 2010, 2 years into the recession. And what they are is a footwear company, and they had 52 retail stores. The time I met them, they had 52. They just lost 2 more stores. They were losing 10% per year during the recession, so 3 consecutive years, okay? Their question was, should we just close up all our retail stores and move everything online? So they had weak demographic reach, poor identity, weak relationship with key buyers like Nike, Air Jordan. So again, they sold men's footwear in the athletic department, okay? Right now, at that point, it was a race to the bottom. It was all about the pricing and not about the value. Why? Because they didn't even know their own value proposition, even though they were around for 25 years. And I didn't really break down what is a value proposition, okay? So the first thing is to look at the positioning. Positioning is different than value proposition. Positioning is more like, well, how does your company fit against other companies within your space, within your industry, within your category, within your subcategory, okay? Or even within a country, quite honestly. So what I take companies through is, in this case, the first place I do is I start off with what is their positioning, and we go through a very intense 3 days to triangulate 3 major components to their business. Their business model, how can it be improved with the change of tide, how can we improve and reinvent their business model, literally. The second thing, how can we reposition their brand to reach, have a further reach in the marketplace? This is all before going into marketing and sales, okay? And a third component, which I call customer strategy, how can we reach additional demographics outside of what they've been doing for 25 years, okay? So the business, the brand, the customer. The business, the brand, and the customer. So it's a pretty intense time. Anyways, this is what they used to look like, okay? And during the strategy session on the second day, I was talking to Eric, and I said, Eric's the owner. I said, Eric, how do you position yourself? how do you see yourself right now? You know, in a space of athletic shoes, 10 being best, how would you rate yourself? With your current identity, with your current look and feel. I said 10 being best. And he says, Howard, a 3 or 4, at 4 at the most. I said, okay, here's the deal. You're saying that you don't want to be price driven. You want to be quality value driven, but you're not matching that look and feel to the product of your, to your products. And that was the gap that we realized, okay, that he got really clear on. And he was always kind of wondering why everyone was trying to bargain with him on pricing of shoes when he carried the biggest brands in the world and he got new shoes before anybody else did, but yet he was treated like, you know, a swap meet, because that's where he came from, quite honestly. He grew his company from a swap meet, okay? Here's the thing that you guys need to think about. You could only be positioned as value, okay, value quality, or price. And there's only space for one for price. Walmart. You know why? Because our margins are so thin, you have to do such massive volume. Okay.
So if you're at that bottom one, that price, like a Spirit Airlines, but they are, their price, that's what it is.
Right.
Being there, you're comfortable with that then, right? Or is that a bad place to be because someone else has just to come back and beat you on price and now you're not there anymore?
I've been on Spirit and I'll never go on Spirit, and they're doing a great job being the cheapest.
They are. And it's horrible, but they own that spot.
They own that space, exactly. And they're doing a brilliant job owning that space. And that's why the other airlines, United, had to position differently than American Airlines and so forth. And so there's a lot to it, but the point being, the other ones have to be based more on value. And quite honestly, they're not doing enough, other than when Virgin was around. Virgin Airlines, which, in my opinion, as far as something that was economical, you know, going through the domestic flights, they had it together. They knew what was going on. They knew how to position it. They knew how to have fun, as well as bring a sense of experience that you couldn't get on the other domestic airlines. Okay. So they did it right, but unfortunately they got absorbed, right? Which is a bummer. So anyways, these are all the big brands they carry. They carry, you know, no nonsense, Skechers, Vans, Puma, big brands that other retail stores would love to carry, but they've been around, and he's built his relationships. He was sitting on gold, but he didn't know how to position it properly, okay? So this is the first thing that we want to do is check out their identity. So after going through a strategy to figure out how we're going to reposition them, he really wanted to be positioned. Here's the thing that came out of the strategy session, by the way. He says, Howard, we haven't been able to move out of the LA area. We're known in certain areas, urban areas, or certain parts of the LA and the urban areas. We want to grow nationwide. We just don't know how. And I said, here's the problem, is that you're only geared towards the Hispanic community, but you haven't opened up your market for Caucasian, Asian, Middle Eastern. You haven't really opened up because your identity doesn't allow it to be so, okay? Now here's the kicker. One of the vice presidents, because I had to work with 5 of the vice presidents in different divisions, and one of the vice presidents said, well, will we alienate our Hispanic community? I said, absolutely not. If we build a brand that they aspire to, they're going to feel like they're special, okay? So they thought by changing it, they might alienate, and I'm telling them no, and here, I'll tell you what happened, okay? So in the identity process, we built a strong brand mark. Now here's the difference between a brand mark and a logo. A logo, like your brother-in-law can design it for a couple $100. And a lot of times it works against the company because it doesn't represent its value, and it doesn't represent the story behind the business, and it doesn't have a business element that's built into it. We design a whole new standard, which we call brand marks. Let me give you a couple examples. They do 365 events a year. That's why we have the heart. They have the smallest shoe size to the largest foot size for, you know, NBA players, okay? They actually want to keep and retain the heritage where everything's on the storefront, okay? Which is called more of a warehouse style, that there's nothing in the back of the room, okay? So each one of these has a story, and each one we need to create to differentiate from all their competitors, like Foot Locker, Zappos, and also differentiate all the big brands that they carry. So it's not an easy task. It's really looking at how can we differentiate and build that mind, differentiate so that way it's instant recall in the mind of the consumer, what we stand for, what we look like, what's our tone, what's our personality, okay? All by design, okay? So this is what they used to look like, WSS, and they had an in-house branding company, branding people, advertising, but they weren't really doing branding. Here's the kicker. We changed, they are known as WSS, Warehouse Shoe Sale, but they really were known by WSS, okay? Warehouse Shoe Sale already gave the feeling by the name, it was a bargain rate brand. That was the first big mistake. The second big mistake is that this didn't look professional enough. This looked like more 2 or 3 out of 10, okay? It looks like you're gonna bargain with them, right? Out of those different marks I showed you, we designed this mark, and then we came up with shoes, style, selection, because that's what they're about. They're trying to go, hey, should we sell clothing? You know, they're kind of in a fear factor, quite honestly, because it's during the recession, it's 2010, they're losing a lot of ground, losing market share, and are going, should we change our business model to allow for more products to be on the shelf? I said, no, you're already infused in the consumer's mind that you're about shoes. You just haven't really built a strong billboard in their mind that could have that instant recall, okay? So it's getting to know what you do and being clear on what you do, and don't try to shift.
Would people still know Warehouse Shoe Sales if it's shoes, shoe style and sale or selection? Doesn't WSS lose its name in most respects?
No, because it was known as WSS, and Ken, to prevent that, we do what's called a relaunch of a brand. So we do this huge announcement to our customers, and we do these big events. Well, a lot of times with a lot of our clients, we do these big events and we get the press there. So people aren't confused, and then we repeat that message over and over so people can really transition into the new look and feel. That's a great question. So how we don't lose anybody and actually create more is that we do a relaunch campaign, a brand relaunch campaign, okay?
It's kind of like most people don't know what CVS stands for, or the ABC stores out of Hawaii. They have no idea what these terms mean. And the question is it necessary? Like CVS is Customers Value Service, but I would bet you 90% of people don't know that. Or do you know what the ABC stores stand for?
In Hawaii?
Yeah, out of Hawaii, ABC.
No, I don't actually.
It's Aloha brings customers, but it doesn't really matter, does it? Like WSS, no. It really doesn't matter now, does it?
It doesn't matter. It's more about how it's meaningful in the mind of the consumer and what is digestible, by the way.
Interesting, okay.
WSS, a smaller mouthful than Warehouse Shoe Sale. Here's another thing too. When it comes to acronyms, you really don't want to have more than 3 acronyms. Like when you have a fourth, let's say it was WSSL, that fourth acronym is what where people get in trouble because they can't remember. Because you got ABC, CBS, NBC, right? There's a rhythm to it. So part of it is the actual way you hear it and the way you say it, as well as the way you see it. And that brings up another thing, by the way, Ken. The more you can engulf the senses when it comes to a brand, the better. So you do have to look at every angle because why? Because everything out of our 5 senses, that's what creates our experience. Yeah. And the more you get to pack these different senses, the more you're going to have an experience that you're going to remember. It's just the nature of the beast. So then we're getting into psychology, but it's truthful,
So Howard, let's pay attention to time because we're
okay. Sorry.
You're killing it. You're doing a great job. I
okay.
love what you're doing. So you're going in a great direction, okay? Because I want people to be able to ask questions, and they're already starting to.
Yeah. So this is when we did a whole rebranding, we had to look at every aspect of the brand that's actually going to entice every part and to introduce different signals to the different senses. So the visual part of it, the listening part of it. So the lighting, like I had to get in, I'm very hands-on. So I actually helped them with all the relighting. And then I helped them like this natural lighting and store displays, what photography styles that we should have, the redesign of all 52 retail stores. We took all the architecture plans and redesigned everything. We looked at the fixture. We looked at literally thousands of aspiration engagement points. Why? Because we want to make sure all the pieces had one look and feel, tone and voice, one personality. If one thing was off, I tell the vice president, I was working with 5 different vice presidents, I'd say, this is not working because this is reason. It actually looks like a separate brand, and you're actually diluting the value of your brand right now by having that type of storefront, okay? Everything matters to me. Everything matters to me. Because it all needs to orchestrate and say world-class, because that's the first thing I get clear. Do you want to be world-class? Well, then we got to be world-class, right? If you want to look amateurs, then you're doing it already. So anyway, so this is the headquarters here. So this is what's really critical is this is the old headquarters. This is the new headquarters. Here's what came out of strategy session. This is how it was implemented. They carry the most brand style shoes than anybody else in the world, but nobody knew it. I said, this is what we're going to do. Visual communication's faster than a written word, okay? What we're going to do is that we're going to show all the brands that you carry and wrap it around the stores. We're going to take every big brand logo, build a sign around it, and wrap it around the store so people could see it a mile away exactly what you sell, okay? Here's the other thing, because I'm into creating multiple revenue streams on the business model part of things. I said, this is what we're going to do. The store, the brand marks, the logos that are closest to the store entrance, we're going to charge them a premium to offset the cost of redoing 52 stores. The other thing that we're going to do that's very unique is that we're going to have lifestyle images from who shops at your stores and who do we want more shoppers of. So we had a lot of data, 25 years of data that I went through. What I do is kind of like looking at, algorithms and looking at the data from the standpoint of what is the actual pattern behind this data and what can it tell us and how can we leverage it to make more money. So what I found out is that the skateboarders are #1 and our soccer players and our runners. So this is all by design as far as the sequence to the store entrance. Now here's the other thing. Everything matters as far as the brand experience. They had a guard, and that guard, when I became what's called a secret shopper to see what the experience would be if I was just someone on an onlooker going in as a bystander, I said, that guard, we've got to train him to be a greeter. So we got rid of his uniform and we put a WSS uniform on him that looked very classy, and we trained him to be a greeter. Why? Because he's at the doorway literally for people to go in the store, and he was intimidating people. So everything matters, and then how you shop the store, which I'll get a little bit more into. Now, again, this is applicable whether you have a retail store, whether you're online. I only have enough time for one case study, but the point being is the same ideas of what kind of DNA do you want to use for your business and for your brand, okay? That's what I want you to walk away with. So WSS here, this is the old billboard where they couldn't get, nobody saw their billboards and nobody really knew what they were selling, okay? You can't really distinguish between who's the actual brand and what are they actually promoting. So we came up with the whole strategy to make things simple. Here's the reason. Each media, you only have a certain amount of time to absorb information. Most people mess that up in marketing and advertising. Most billboards around the city, you can't read it. You only have 1.3 seconds when it comes to a billboard. You got 2.3 seconds when it comes to a package on a shelf. So you really need to understand the science behind how things are communicated and how the brain is receiving the information to make sense out of it, okay? So anyways, what we did is we did this, and they couldn't get any offset dollars from all the big brands that they carried. When we got done with the billboard, guess what? Now we're getting offset costs from our actual brands that we carry to put all these billboards, not just in LA, we are now nationwide, okay? This is the vehicle wrap here. This is a new vehicle wrap. We show some of the, this is the older store, but you still want to show the warehouse part of it. Okay, and then we want to create a website that looked better than Nike's, literally. I said, well, let's figure out how people buy. And we found things that Nike didn't figure out as far as the shopping experience. And then the interiors, then we actually redesigned the reception area, everything to communicate the brand. This is the interior. Here are some opportunities that were being overlooked. And I want you guys on this Zoom call to think about your own company. This is all for you. This isn't for me, this is for you. There are only 7 aisles in most of the stores. This is called an end cap. This is precious real estate, okay? Precious real estate. They were just giving it away. I said, no. When people come into the store, the first things they're gonna notice is the end cap. We need to sell those as precious real estate. And it did work. So when you think about your own company, what is it that you could really show as being valuable real estate, whether it's a product or service or information? There's always opportunities and there's always premium prices on things that might be overlooked as a blind spot, okay? So anyways, we redesigned their interiors. This is their new store downtown by the Staples Center. And what we did to open up this store is we became a major disruptor. Remember, they're about to get rid of all the retail stores. They own all the retail stores. And I said, no, here's the deal. I said, it's not that retail stores are going out, well, they are going out of business, but it's not that retail store is the problem and you should go to the web. Here's the deal. You cannot get an experience at retail that you can't get on the web and vice versa. What you can't get in real person is to experience the brand and touch it and feel it. This is what worked for Apple, by the way, and why Apple became successful was the Apple Store. Right. A lot of people just go with the trends and go, oh, let's do everything on the website. That's a lot of times it's true, and a lot of times it's not true. It's that you haven't been a disruptor in the space to rethink your real estate, to rethink your space and treat it differently to create a new experience. So what we did is that for the NBA playoffs, we had Snoop Dogg be a DJ. And this was kind of like the introduction of having it really interactive, of having a fun retail retail store to actually have a DJ. We started to introduce that, and now you're seeing it more, okay? So now we're actually again and again engrossing the senses of that brand rather than just visual, but with also music. Why? Because music has people stay longer if they enjoy it, okay? The other thing that we did that was a disruptor, I just said, why don't we have it so people could actually try on the shoes and kick around like a mock-up goalie post? Why can't they experience it? Why? Because like when you get in a car, a new car, when you're test driving cars, you know if you get in that car that you really like and you step on the accelerator, your emotions are now fully engaged and you probably want to really buy that car. It's the same with product. It doesn't matter what the product is, you got to get them engaged in the activity or in situation, the context of how it would be used, in the context of how it would be used, okay? So anyways, what happened there, and then, well, excuse me, this is really important. This is what's called a brand style guide. So even though they had their in-house designers, we created a whole look and feel that now they could duplicate by creating what's called a brand style guide, and meaning that now everybody has to follow our rules. Why? Because it creates a unified look. And if someone tries to squish the logo or use a different color or different font, it looks like you're a knockoff brand. You just diluted the value of your company. Your brand, if it's done right, will impact the value of your company, the bottom line, especially if you're looking to sell it or get acquired, okay? It's just the nature of the beast. Anyways, I told them to have a 10% increase in their profits after a year. I went to the CFO with the pilot stores that we worked on, just on the outside, not even the inside, 200% growth in 7 months. And this is during the recession. And we had a 1,600% gain on the website, okay?
Howard, can we throw some questions in real quick?
Sure, let's go for it.
Let's go to Andrew. Andrew, I'm muting you. Go ahead. What's your question, Andrew? Right again.
Hi, Andrew.
Andrew, there you go.
Yes, can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yeah, hi, Andrew.
Howard, hi, good to see you again. We talked about this a little bit on Saturday, but how would you think, could you talk a little bit about your thinking process around finding a really great name in today's very, very noisy, very overcrowded market? I've been thinking about this for the past 3 days and I am stumped.
Yeah, so that's a great question. We always start off by doing usually a 3-day, sometimes a 2-day strategy session. The reason for this, until you are really clear what you stand for, what differentiates you, and why this matters to people, and understanding your target market, which I'm going to talk a little bit more about, a name cannot be created without actually having a lot of meaning over time or a lot of value, okay? Because the reason being for this example, like I just mentioned, like let's say with, Domino's Pizza, right? They had Domino's Pizza, but if they really thought about like what ways, all the different ways they can make money in the future and reverse that engineer, they probably would have just left off with just Domino's without having a word that actually limits their growth. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
So, but a couple tips to you, Andrew. Use a name that's actually easy to spell. This isn't, okay, well, let me back up. There's 5 ways to create your name. There's descriptive, there's suggestive, okay? There's actually what's called arbitrary, and there's what's called fanciful. Fanciful would be like, even though it's not, but people think it's like Google, for example. Arbitrary would be like apple the fruit. Now people don't even think of the fruit, they think of apple. The higher you go up, the more better opportunity to actually trademark the name with the registration through the government. In addition, it will take more time to brand because it's different, okay, more abstract, more fanciful. It will take more time to brand, but the great thing is that it will differentiate you further from names that are more descriptive or suggestive. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes total sense. I've covered the basics. I am aware of this, and
Okay.
I guess that's where that's why you do this professionally and I don't.
Yeah, I feel I can help you, but the point being is that the other thing too, this is really critical. As soon as you like and love a name, see if it's obviously, well, not so obvious. See if it's available as a .com. Take up the .com and take up the .net and take up the .org, and it's the cheapest piece of insurance you could ever own. Okay, so if you really like it, you go, God, I think there's something there. Just grab it, because you know what? In a couple of days, which happened to me, the names disappear, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Wow.
So so I'll keep going on and I'll answer more questions. But
let's go to CK. CK, go for it. Thank you, Andrew.
Hey, Howard, thanks for sharing your expertise. My understanding of everything you shared so far is brand is an experience, is how I feel when I interact with this entity, right? And then your teaching is, hey, get to the essence, the atomic unit of what it is, then and expand from that. But you also have mentioned, hey, you can do logo marks, you can do branding, you can do website, you can do storefront, you can do wrapping. It's a lot of things. So can you take us to kind of like a hierarchical way of where do you start as a way to optimize one's experience with the brand?
So that's a great question too. The 2 biggest, most important assets you could ever own, okay, which are 2 critical pieces to building brand, but only 10% of it, is the name, and then what kind of mark are you creating that's going to be the face to your company, okay? The third component, I'm going to name 5 of the components. A third component is the color. What color are you going to own in your space? And if someone owns that color, there's variations, what's called values and saturations. There's also what's called using a secondary color, okay? So like a mirror trade, for example, right? Purple and the green. So you could actually look at, it's really important that you look at who's in your space and who's doing what, okay? So the hierarchy that I like taking companies through is, first we do a strategy to figure out their positioning. Then in that strategy, we figure out who are the biggest three competitions they have, and break down their strengths, weaknesses, and what's making them unique, and then what's making you unique, okay? And a SWOT analysis is great, but I think it's outdated in my opinion. What we created was, what's their strength, what's their weakness, and what's unique. The uniqueness is what helps build a brand the quickest. So After the name, after the mark, then the tagline. Okay, well, color and then tagline. Your tagline is going to be the fourth element that's going to make it really important that you have something that helps people know what you stand for in your marketplace. Okay, that's why a lot of people remember like just do it, for example, right? Or think different, right? In Apple. There's a reason for that. The fifth element in designing, this is what I call the brand core, by the way. I call it the brand core, but also the brand icon, is what font are you going to use in every situation, whether it's online, whether it's TV, whether it's print, okay? What is the primary font that you use that's going to be recognizable to the consumer? If you look at ads from Apple and their packaging, a lot of times you don't have to see their mark and just see the font that they're using that registers. All this helps to remember your brand versus others. And then after that, we usually go to brand style guide, okay, like I showed you. Then from the brand style guide, then we move to website, product designing, billboards, storefronts, the list goes on. But we always start with those essentials first because those are what I call the DNA ingredients. The DNA ingredients to the identity to your brand, the identity to burn an image in the consumer's mind.
All right, great. Is that helpful, CK? CK.
Yep, totally. Thank you.
Let's go to Harry. Harry, you got a question for Howard?
I do. Howard, a great presentation. And I love your process and how you take this 360-degree approach to building a brand and how everything needs to work together. And the brands like Apple, Disney that you mentioned, and Nike do it so well. But I'm hearing a lot of sort of great conventional best practices. And I'm wondering how you deal with, and especially I know you did one case study with a brick and mortar, and I'm sure you've got other great clients that you help immensely, but what are you doing about this disruptive technology that's happening? I would think like 5G, for an example, how are you integrating that into what your brand strategy is in the 360-degree and how that technology is disrupting every aspect?
So Harry, that's a great question. So you're exactly right. It's understanding the principle of each media. Whether it's social media, whether it's a website, it's all about how are people interfacing with that media, print, and understanding who your target market is, which is 3 generations, baby boomers and X and Y. People call them millennials, but there's absolutely a delineation between an X and Y generation in a millennial scope, you could say. For example, my generation as a baby boomer, I still love to read. I still like printed material, right? A lot of companies make the mistake. A young company, make the mistake, and they don't even know who their target market is, and it could be someone of a baby boomer, right? And they're doing all these things for social media, like Pinterest, which has nothing to do with how that person's going to absorb the information. Right. Okay, so you're right. It's understanding the principle of these different applications and technologies that are starting to rise, and understanding who's going to be using that technology and how you want to utilize that platform based on principles.
Now that goes right back to our conversation earlier about Nike. Nike has figured out not just the story for each generation they're going after, but also the technology and the message points to them, being TV, radio for older or print, and then app-driven side. Yeah, that's really, so Nike really has figured this out.
Yep.
Without a doubt.
Yep, you're right. And Nike, it was funny, back in the 90s, he didn't even believe in branding and advertising. And then obviously the next year, like quadruple his sales. And then of course, Phil became a believer, right?
Nike has an incredible digital department there. And, I think the guys in the group like Lloyd that understand that big data and how they know how to use that and use it for branding. So,
but Harry, I think the point is this: we're in the baby boomer generation. Well, we're Gen X. We're Gen X side of things. So us Gen X, we watch TV, we listen to radio, we read print. Right. We probably wouldn't be gravitating towards a mobile phone app and TikTok. We're not going to be in TikTok.
Right.
Where if they were marketing towards my son, it's going to be a TikTok, Instagram environment.
Exactly.
So and that story is going to be different for them than it is for you and I. They
Exactly.
figured that out. So as you sit and look at Nike and even Apple, think about Apple when it comes to the watch.
Right.
They know that a healthy person that's an exercise person compared to somebody that's more of a indoor person, they're going to market it differently. And the mediums are going to be different they're marketing it on too. God, Howard, I don't like that we only had an hour with you today. Kind of sucks. Harry wants to take you home and have dinner with you, right, Harry? The whole mystery thing. She's not going to let you leave. Guys, I know we're running short. I'm going to do Alexander. I'm going to train you, Alexander. You got to put your question inside the actual chat area, but I'll let it go today. Alexander, what's your question?
All right, I'll learn quick. Put it in the chat. Thank you.
Yep.
My question is real quick. This is great information and really like thinking big business and everything. As an artist, as a painter, I know there's a lot of avenue that can go this way to me as well. I guess my thing is there something that you would twist to like a smaller, like as an actual painter trying to market myself and make my brand for myself?
Yeah, so to answer your question, I do work with single artists. I've actually worked with the sisters that became very big artists. And it's always looking at what is the potential. I always look at the potential. I guess you could say I am. I'm a visionarist. And so I look way down in the future and I imagine, based on what you're creating, how much impact can you have on humanity? And what are the revenues what are the channels and revenue channels that you're not looking at? Does that make sense? Because a lot of times artists are only looking at their canvas, but they're not imagining in hotels, or let's say on, working on the side of a building, or looking at it, they're working as the LA, the Convention and Visiting Bureau as their main piece of art, or looking at it as an app, or looking at it as, a museum piece. So there's all these different avenues an artist can take with one single image and have it go into all these different distribution channels.
Yeah, but Howard, let's be realistic. Personal branding is radically different than the company or product branding, because the personal branding is a different type of message that's wrapped around that person. So like you, I look at you have a personal brand, and you got the surfboard behind you, you got the hair, you got the shirt, your personal brand, without a doubt. I've seen on YouTube videos, I've seen on your any of your material, this is your thing. And you're cohesive and you connect with it on a regular basis. You have the surfer attitude. Heck, I don't know, you might be in Kentucky right now, but I believe you're in Malibu, and you're that Malibu dude who's working with those cool California brands, because you've made that personal brand just cohesive across the board. You have one message. You're the branding guy. Where Nike has a different message for different generations, right? So being an artist, that's got to be a lot harder, because he's got to do a personal branding exercise as opposed to a branding exercise, right?
Well, there is a distinction. I do brand a lot of personal brands for a lot of people on stage, for example, like John Asseroff, James Melichek, So I brand a lot of people that are on stage. It's a question, though, is how big do they want their brand to be, if it's going to be exclusive or inclusive.
Right.
Okay. So like with John Asheroff, he wanted more time for himself, but he was always a face of the brand, right? So we created NeuroGym that he became what's called the ambassador to the brand, the spokesperson to the brand, but the brand itself still had its own life. Okay. So
it sounds like, Howard, this is another session. And
okay.
I don't mean to cut you short, Alexander. I think you have a very good question there.
Yeah.
And I think it's something we need to dive into. Guys, my goal is for you to convince Howard to become a metal member.
Yeah, no, I love when I went there. And now that things are different, because I was traveling 3 to 4 times. I've been traveling like crazy till the COVID-19. So
Yep.
I've been liking staying home. And so that's changing my, you could say, my itinerary. So
Let me
yeah.
just tell you, it's like tomorrow at 1 o'clock, we have some of the top doctors in the world on tomorrow, and we'll be talking about COVID on things you don't even see in the news. So want to join us tomorrow at 1. And guys, Howard, thank you so much for making time for us today. And you're brilliant. I think you've been very, 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 very helpful. Thank you so much. Everyone, unmute yourself and thank Howard.
Thank you, Howard.
Thank you, Howard.
Thank you, Howard.
Really great.
By the
Thank
way,
you.
Thank you.
And we'll see you soon, Howard.
Thank
I'm
you,
offering
Howard.
a 20-minute consultation. If someone wants to take me on, I could talk about one-on-one with your business. Just email me here on the screen, and I'll give you a free 20-minute consultation.
Or
Thank
is your
you.
email address, Howard?
I'm sorry?
Email address?
Oh,
It's on the screen.
Howard@howcreative.com. Howard@howcreative.com.
There you go. Thank you, Howard. Thank you, everyone. Talk to y'all soon.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.